Hi guys, welcome to another audio science tutorial. Today's tutorial is going to be based on jungle snares. Now, more than likely, you're probably familiar with this type of snare. Now, the origins of this snare pretty much come from jungle music and technology at the time. Back in the day, there was a sampler called the AMIT S1000, and it had a time stretching feature on it. Now, the time stretching on that sampler wasn't really good. Obviously, it was made so that if your samples were short, you could stretch them to make them fit. But what a lot of jungle producers did back in that time was they took snares and kicks and all sorts of elements, even vocals, and they put them through this time stretching utility on the S1000, and they stretched the sound beyond its musical range. And that's where you kind of get that kind of metallic kind of time stretch sound, and it's really prominent in early jungle tunes. If you go back and listen to some of the early jungle tunes, it's pretty much every producer at that time used that effect. So what we're going to do a three-step process. We're going to take the amen break, we're going to time stretch it, and then we're going to put it into the EXS24. We're going to identify the snare, and then we're going to put that snare across the whole of the keyboard and then start playing some snare riffs along with the backing track. Okay, so to begin with, we've got our backing track. If you like these types of sounds, they're available on the Audio Science Sample Library 2. There's a wide range of percussion, beats, basses, and all sorts of stuff in there, so check that out. Okay, so we've got our backing track. Now, here's the amen break. So now we're going to time stretch this amen break and see what results we get. Okay, so on to the time stretching part. Now, we need an AMIT S1000 or an AMIT sampler. A lot of you probably won't have one. They are very useful bits of gear. If you can get one, you can get them quite cheap. They're probably about 50 quid, sometimes even £25. They're so cheap, when originally they were like, what, thousands. So if you haven't got one of those, you can use the next best thing. There's an app called the Ackizer, and you can get this from the Ackizer project, blogspot.com. This runs on Windows and Mac, and it's an app that pretty much emulates the time stretching algorithm of an AMIT S1000 sampler. I've used this a numerous amount of time on numerous tunes, and it gives good results. So we're going to load the amen break into this app, and we're going to begin time stretching it. Okay, so here we have the Ackizer app. I've loaded the amen break into it already by using this tab here. We've got the algorithm section here. There's a revised algorithm and a classic one. I tend to stick with the classic one as I like the sound of it, but you can experiment with the other if you want. And then we've got the time factor here. That's how much you want to stretch the sound. At 100% it will stay the same. At 200% it will obviously double. At 300 it will triple, and so on and so on. We've got the cycle length here. You can play around with that, and that's the quality of the time stretching algorithm. That will affect that. We've got our transpose function here, so you can transpose the beat up or down and get some interesting results. I tend to leave these two here the same, and I normally always just play with the time factor. So let's mess around with this and see what results we get. So 100 being normal, let's double it to 200. See how that sounds. Okay, so you can hear it's stretched it twice the amount, and you can hear the sound of that time stretching. It's kind of bright, and it's kind of really bodied and metallic sounding. let's try 300. Okay, so that's 3 times. For snares, I tend to go for 400%. Okay, so I like the sound of that. I'm going to click save here and save that to our Logic directory, wherever our sounds are. And then we're going to load this sound into the EXS sampler. Okay, so we've got our AMIT breakbeat that we time stretched with the Ackizer, and we've loaded that into the EXS sampler here. And what I've done is I've stretched that AMIT breakbeat across the whole of the keyboard so that we can play each element or any element of that AMIT breakbeat across the keyboard. So let's hear how that sounds. This is the kick drum. And like I said, we can play any element. So let's see how the hi-hat sounds. Now obviously for this tutorial, it's called Jungle Snares, so we're going to focus on the snare drum. Let's just zoom in so we can get it absolutely. Okay, that sounds quite cool. We're now going to sequence this snare. Okay, so rather than play this snare dry, I tend to start off with some effects. So I put an effect on the snare so that I can get an idea or get some inspiration with some echoes and some delays. So it gives me an idea of what to write as such. So we've got the H delay here. Okay, that sounds quite cool. And to tidy it up, I've removed some of the low end up to 180 Hertz, and I've taken off some of the top end as well. When you time stretch a sound, you can get these kind of artifacts that will be really piercing to the ear, so I tend to just shave off a little bit of the top end there. Okay, so here's a little sequence that I've created. There's some 16th notes here, 8th note, and some longer notes. And there's a call and response between them as well. So like, you know, you get the faster notes, longer notes, and so on. This is how it sounds without the backing beat. And with. Okay guys, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Take a breakbeat or a snare drum, put it through an Akai S1000's time stretching algorithm, or if you haven't got one of those, use the Ackizer. Load that into a sampler across the whole of a keyboard, find an element of that breakbeat that you like the sound of, add some delay and some EQ and start playing that element, whether it's a snare drum or the kick drum. Add that to your music. Have fun, experiment, and I'll see you on the next tutorial.